Dobro jutro, še enkrat vsem skupaj izkoriščam priložnost, ker še ni poldne, pa lahko rečem dobro jutro. Good morning once again. We will begin with the second session of today's day of our symposium, and we're going to present the four one by one the four colleagues who are going to aboard different and very interesting topics. And after the presentations of the topics, we're going to have a discussion as usual. My first speaker, the first speaker I'm going to introduce is my colleague from Primorska University, Krištof Jacek Kozak, who studied at the same department as me, but a few years later, comparative literature in Ljubljana, and later on he specialized in and also worked at Alberta, the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada, and he's a full professor of literature and at University of Primorska, where I had the pleasure to work with him also for a few years. We were also colleagues there. So the title of his presentation is A Playwright's Confrontation with the Basic Human Condition, Being a Refugee. Please, Jacek, take the podium is yours, so to say. Yeah.
Much, Tomaž. I'll be speaking in English as well. I do apologize, I won't have any PowerPoint, so this is all you'll be seeing, all the distraction that is in front of you. As always, or as frequently, when one starts writing one's paper or presentation, the topic veers away and leads you to some, new spaces, because new ideas come. And this is exactly what happened to me. So it's going to be more about the concept, the most broadly understood concept of migration that I would actually want to talk about. And, of course, linked to that, not analysis, but at least today that this presentation, mentioning a few texts which actually fictionally bring all these concepts into life, so to speak. So in terms of migration or migrating in general, one would say that this seems to be one of the essential terms defining our contemporary world. Of course, particularly as a consequence of a rather unquestionable datum that conflicts around us multiply. So we more narrowly link the concept of migration with actually the political situation that has been developing around us since, I don't know, especially in contemporary times. But despite the clear knowledge humanity possesses about these consequences, the conflicts seem rather to snowball, and with them also the ubiquitousness of human resettlement increases. Regardless of this exacerbated contemporary reality, one would have to concede that migrations as such have been an original mode of existence of the human race in general. So if we broaden this scope now, what comes out is that conceptually migrations as such rest on the presumption of a displacement from one place to another, often very different one, the place I mean. Human beings are usually expected to dwell in one world, one reality, and only infrequently, as we know from the past literature or the old literature, only individual heroes cross these civilizational borders in order to enter a habitually forbidden world and return from it after having acquired some sort of magical object or obtained secret knowledge or illumination. So migration was in the past reserved only for, the semi-gods, heroes, and so on. By its immanent nature, this location inherently presupposes the division of the world into two halves, and this is where, our contemporary and not only contemporary experience comes in, and that is the fact that this presupposes a boundary, a limes, right? And division to the place within the border, on this side of the border, and outside of it. Consequently, this division entails the crossing of these possibly fictional borders, which per se opens up an all too basic human differentiation, namely between us, the proper people, and not us, as they have been, well, since the time immemorial, known as the barbarians, as you well know. I won't be mentioning here, all the literary examples, not only theatrical or dramatic, but all other cases, from, let's say, Epic of Gilgamesh to the contemporary times. And it comes as no surprise that also drama actually has been involved in presenting these topics quite a bit. Dramatic literature has literally, since, its inception, dealt with these same questions. Let's think about Oedipus. Let's think about other ancient or original tragedies, right? So migrations understood in the broadest possible sense, particularly poignantly reappeared in the last few decades. This statement comes, unsurprisingly, as Europe and the world have both been confronted with an unbelievably increased numbers of conflict situations. And one could probably link the concept and the idea of migration to different topics, which I'm going to mention right now, that also appeared in drama, such as, for example, the war in the Balkans in the 90s. This has been a part of quite a few dramatic plays. Then war as such, war which expels, of course, certain people. Then emigration, right? And just as a footnote, I can tell you that on my way to this institute this morning, I saw a theater poster that Drama Theater, Slovenian National Theater, is going to premiere tomorrow Mrožek's play The Emigrants, so Emigranci, which is quite a coincidence, actually. Then one possible topic that might be included is terrorism, of course, and most broadly, probably, political reality and economic hardships. Within this already numerous group, it is possible, or I could probably discern a particularly formidable combination. That is, texts where, through the above-mentioned topics, two very different worlds painfully collide, the ancient and the contemporary. Consequently, migrations as a theme have influenced the traditionally most established dramatic genres, such as tragedy in its original ancient and later Elizabethan and neoclassical guises, and also tweaked a little their contemporary counterparts. Present-day dramatic heroes, too, have found a way to join the ancient sorrowful chorus reciting to the tune of palpable human suffering, regardless of the fact whether the amalgamation of the original and contemporary migrational topics have been taken literally or metaphorically. So in my paper, but not in the presentation, I actually tackled three texts that stood out in this sense. The first was Elfriede Jelinek's text from 2013 with the original title Die Schutzbefohlenen, which was, of course, is an adaptation of Aeschylus's The Suppliants. Then Stefan Hertmann's Antigone in Molenbeek, which is the play I'm going to discuss today, and the Slovenian play Vinko Möderndorfer's Romeo and Juliet Were Refugees from 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And coincidentally, Möderndorfer does have another text which in the title at least has Antigone from 2019, Antigone 20 years later. And it refers to the Slovenian war, if we may say so, of independence. But in this play, unfortunately, Antigone is a name of a helicopter, which doesn't have, much to do with the ancient heroine, so to speak. The drama I would like to discuss here, Hertmans' Antigone in Molenbeek, of course, refers to the today already infamous, I would say rather infamous, Sint Jans Molenbeek, one of the 19 municipalities of Brussels' capital region. Over 100 years, it, of course, was a booming suburb with considerable working-class population, and which later sort of was degraded because of the industry that somehow fell apart and gave ground to poverty, rising crime rates, and cultural degradation. It entered the collective consciousness in 2015 with the November Paris terrorist bombings, 2 days after the Charlie Hebdo attack. Molenbeek has consequently been assigned labels by later, let's say, journalists and people who dealt with that, such labels as the so-called jihadi capital in Europe, as seething den of Islamist terror, and a no-go zone. And precisely Molenbeek is a place in which contemporary Antigone finds herself. What actually struck me in the Hertmans text was how he really uncannily transposed all the seminal elements with their sundry meanders of Sophocles' Antigone ancient play into contemporary reality. To that extent, so much so that his text appears as if literally the ancient dramatist's sister creation. Though written in a very, contemporary post-dramatic, if we agree on that term, fashion, in a form of a steady stream of thoughts interspersed with factual observations regarding people, times, and places, the play amalgamates the dramatic plot with both inner ruminations as well as the external stage directions. Thus, the author achieves an exceptionally vivid description of both the events as well as the protagonist's thoughts and words. There is no graphic separation between any elements of the texts, be it speaker's words, didascalia, or description of action. Still, this absolutely does not mean that the text is only a lesedrama. Quite on the contrary. With this inherent energy, the play opens the door for a powerful theatrical experience. Just in few words, let me tell you the contents of the play and why it so uncannily fits into the Antigone story. Hertmans' Antigone is called Nuria, and she's arguably a Moroccan young lady, ironically a student of philosophy at the University of Brussels, who also happens to be a sister of one of the suicide bombers. She and her brother grew up, as so many immigrant children do, literally on the fringes of society, yet still with one leg in. Before the attack, young brother and sister by no means stood out from the crowd. They seemed to convey a feeling of relatively successful integration. Yet the action, of course, starts after the terrible incident, after the world and all the mentioned appearances instantly disintegrated for, her, everybody else, and the world. Her father, not being able to withstand his personal pain and societal pressure, flees and leaves his daughter alone to deal with the aftermath of the tragedy. First and foremost, virtually complete resemblance to her ancient counterpart, Núria sets on the quest of finding and, against all odds, of course, burying the remains of her terrorist brother. It's probably useless to tell you that Núria's fate, of course, resembles the fate of Antigone. By burying him, of course, because especially in Islam, this would, of course, help, or this would be the only way to actually heal this gaping emotional familial wound that she has been actually subject to, if I may say so. And within the play, Núria thus enters into a progressively absurdist, Kafkaesque va-et-vient, lasting over weeks with the powers that be in the guise of the police. Everybody, especially the officer responsible for the quartier, evades giving her a straight answer as to where her brother's remains. He, I quote, is a kind of an enemy of the state that was, end of quote, that these remains are being kept if they still exist, of course. That is, if anything earthly has remained of him. And by this increasing sort of halting her back, she develops her own energy in trying to find those remains, and she thus finds in herself increasingly constrained, even cornered, so to speak, of course, with no support from anyone whatsoever. This situation leaves her, again very much like her ancient predecessor, in a position where she alone sees no other way out than to take the things into her own hands. Finally, of course, she manages to learn that, well, her brother, or his remains, are being kept in the Institute of Forensic Medicine. She breaks into it, and exactly as she actually finds the bag, she is being caught and taken away. She's being then held first in prison, and then increasingly with her aggressiveness or aggression, so to speak, mounting she's being transferred into a mental institution. And the play ends with her speaking about herself, seeing herself as some white object. Of course, we know what this whiteness means, right? Drifting away from this world into, well, oblivion, or so to speak, into death. So she too, like original Antigone, is dying in the end.
3 minutes.
The other two texts, Jelinek and Moderator, is actually they both refer to their famous predecessors like Aeschylus the Suppliants, but they do play. They do not take their, let's say, source as literally as Hertmans did. Jelinek's story is probably known to everybody, so I won't be repeating it. And in Moderator, Romeo and Juliet, or Roman and Juna, are actually outcasts, so to speak, cast out of the present society, and their life disintegrates only when they were, like, in a way of hubris, actually, when they were trying to patch everything together. So, in strict sense of the word, this is no migration whatsoever. But if we understand migration sort of more broadly, this could be understood also as, being stranger in one's own world. Regardless, while similarities between the originals and their contemporary variations appear more or less clearly, what becomes obvious are also certain differences. In my opinion, the basic one is that of exemplarity. Sophocles' Antigone stands out as an ideal to be followed or not, right? Not as an everyman's embodiment. She's precisely what she is by being an exception, by not substituting for everybody else, which is evidently in tune with the theory of ancient tragedy. And whereas where all these three modern texts, contemporary texts, come in and come together is precisely an essential basic similarity, namely that they actually come and speak for this every man's situation. We all are sort of not members, but we all can see each other or ourselves in their roles. While commenting on Antigone in Molenbeek, a Polish theatrologist, 𝗀𝗶𝗺𝗫𝗀𝗍𝗂𝗓 already understood the text precisely in its broadest associations, namely that no human being originates just from one place. That even at home one is more often than not an émigré, a stranger of a kind. In short, that we all live in and come from Molenbeek. And that's precisely my point with these all three texts, actually, where they somehow bring out contemporary understanding of every man's inclusion in these processes. It depends, of course, how broadly we perceive migrations, but it is rarely that one sees somebody just, pure as a pure existence and a pure entity. And that's what I would say, of course, again, interesting that this drama, which is either post-dramatic or whichever way we call it, in its fictional approaches, right, that I referred to in my question, somehow refers back to the stories about, us, about all of us. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jacek. We're looking forward to read your essay on the theme, which I think will be embodied later on in the afternoon also by Piet regarding in his paper on Milo Rau, who in his work also deals with the theme you elaborated. So thank you very much once more, and I'm going to invite Zala Dobovšek, my colleague from the Academy of Theatre. She's an assistant professor at our academy. She did a very nice research in theater and also basically also on the refugees in the territory of former Yugoslavia. And today she's going to present us a paper with the title "The Representation and Understanding of Poverty in Contemporary Slovenian Drama." So something which really deals very with the Slovenian new reality. So please. Yeah.
Če bi tudi jaz sedela?
Lahko, ja, seveda, izvoli. Kar izvoli.
Hvala, Tomaž. Thank you, Tomaž. I will speak in Slovenian language, but we can kindly regards to all the English-speaking audience. Moj naslov prispevka je Reprezentacija in razumevanje revščine v sodobni slovenski dramatiki. Zdaj, na tokratni prezentaciji se bom v bistvu fokusirala predvsem na reprezentacijo in mogoče manj na razumevanje, zato ker ta pojem razumevanja zahteva eno širšo raziskavo. Se pravi, primere, ki jih bom tokrat predstavila, bodo teksti in pa predstave, ki zelo neposredno obravnavajo revščino in delavski razred. Hkrati pa me zanima, kako je tudi recimo slovenska dramatika v zadnjih 20 letih mimo teh projektov, ki neposredno naslavljajo to tematiko, pravzaprav razumela revščino. V zadnjem času lahko vidimo, da nastaja veliko projektov in pa tudi dramskih besedil, ki obravnavajo delavski razred, prekarizacijo in socialno revščino v najširšem pomenu. Tle se seveda odpira vprašanje, ali to izhaja seveda tudi zaradi tega, ker se je v bistvu gledališče in gledališka scena, predvsem mlajša generacija, znašla v tej situaciji in je to v bistvu tisti glavni povod, ki v bistvu je tudi glavna motivacija, da se nekako reflektira. Seveda imamo tudi v prejšnja leta, prav recimo 𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, ki smo ga že omenili, je eden od teh predstavnikov, ki v bistvu naslavlja to tematiko. Bilo mi je recimo dostikrat zanimivo pri njemu, da je ta neka širša interpretacija njegovih tekstov ali pa predstav oziroma tudi filmov dostikrat razumljena, da je to neka predstavitev revščine, ki je pretirana, ki je spektakularna, ki je neverjetna, na nek način skoraj nadrealna. Ampak v bistvu se mi zdi, da je ta spektakelskost, ki mogoče je vpisana vse to, je v bistvu spektakelskost, ki jo revščina sama pač tudi vsebuje. Se pravi, načini preživetja, recimo res neke revne populacije, so v resnici zelo groteskni in zelo ekstremni. Tako da ja, zdaj, kot rečeno, v nadaljevanju bom predstavila in izpostavila dva dramska teksta in tudi na to sta nastali tudi predstavi. Sicer pa se bom potem v članku ukvarjala tudi z nekim širšim naborom in kot rečeno, na eni strani gre za fiktivne dramske tekste in na drugi strani za zelo surovo dokumentarno preslikavo. Zdaj, ena moja teza in opažanje v bistvu že več let, od koder izhaja tudi motiv, da se danes ukvarjam s to temo, je na nek način prepričanje, da gledališka scena na nek način sledi neki miselnosti politike in medijev oziroma neke širše družbe, ki v bistvu revščino ne razume oziroma ne uvidi v pravi luči. Se pravi, meni se zdi, da dostikrat v gledališču, ko gledam predstave, je v bistvu tisti, ki se na nek način izjavljajo za revne, za ljudi brez gmotne podpore, za ljudi, ki imajo takšne in drugačne primanjkljaje, so v resnici srednji ali pa celo višji srednji družbeni razred. To pomeni, želela bi nekako poudariti to, da nek delavski razred ali pa revna populacija niti ne pride do problemov, kot so ne vem, počitnice, avtomobil, krediti, nimajo niti svojih stanovanj, to tudi kasneje pač eden od tekstov to naslavlja. In se vidi, da v bistvu, da je to, hočem reči, da je dostikrat se revščina prikazuje, obravnava neke probleme ljudi, ki se ukvarjajo s temi problemi, ki sem jih zdaj naštela, medtem ko se revna populacija do tega sploh nima pristopa. Zdaj seveda, popolnoma se zavedam in seveda s tem na nek način se tudi težko ukvarjati, ker je v bistvu smo ves čas na robu nekega moraliziranja, kako spregovoriti o tej temi, kako v resnici jo naslavljati. In dejstvo je, kar pa se mi zdi tudi zelo pomembno, je to, da se tu v bistvu v tem smislu, naj bo to dramatika ali pa kasneje režija oziroma neka uprizoritev, ne moremo izogniti, da bi neka že etablirana oziroma ja, ali pa preskrbljena populacija govorila o revni populaciji. Zato, ker revna populacija sama sebe ne more predstavljati. Pač oni nimajo dostopa niti do gledališča, v resnici tudi njihov način življenja jim ne dopušča tega, da bi pisali sami dramske tekste. Se pravi, da je tle ta navezava, da nekdo drug prevzame pač njihovo vidik na njihovo pozicijo, tako rekoč nujen. Seveda pa potem to postane problem, ker pridemo seveda do tega, zakaj se zdaj gledališče, ali pa ljudje znotraj gledališkega sveta, ki imajo itak vse, da se zdaj s tem ukvarjajo. Skratka, da zdaj preidem na dva konkretna primera, ki ju bom izpostavila tokrat danes. Prvi je dokumentarni projekt po motivih Cankarjevega 𝗀𝗶𝗺𝗀𝗀 in njegove pravice v režiji in konceptu 𝗔𝗺𝗫𝗀𝗀, ki je nastala leta 2018. Druga bo pa dramsko besedilo in kasneje tudi uprizoritev Naše skladišče 𝘊𝗀𝗊𝗀. Gre za tako imenovano socialno dramo, ki je lani dobila tudi Grumovo nagrado. Oba sta predstavnika mlajše generacije in kot sem že rekla, oba sta v bistvu predstavnika neke generacije, ki se ju ta tematika še kako dotika. Sta pa seveda oba teksta zelo različna. Pri 𝗔𝗺𝗫𝗀𝗀𝗀 gre za to, da v bistvu ubere zelo direkten in neposreden način dokumentarnega principa uprizarjanja. V tem primeru je on in njegova avtorska ekipa odidejo na različne lokacije in opravijo intervjuje z različnimi profili prekarnih delavcev. Se pravi od čistilk do delavcev na gradbiščih, delavcev v koprski luki in seveda se na nek način hočejo tudi dotakniti prekariata znotraj kulture ali pa oziroma umetnosti. Tle naredijo seveda nek tak minimalni in v bistvu zelo dober premik, da ne grejo direktno na samozaposlene z vidika znotraj gledališča, ampak grejo v arhitekturni biro, kjer imamo primer, da recimo neka mlada arhitektka, ki seveda dela honorarno v neki sicer elitnem biroju. In tle se vzpostavi pač razmerje, da vidimo, da se v bistvu, da dan danes prekariat pač več je neizprosen za vse. Seveda so različne stvari, če govorimo o tem, da je zraven seveda še nek nor fizičen napor, ki ga v bistvu zahtevajo drugi poklici in tu, kjer gre za v bistvu neko precejšno mentalno izkoriščanje. Pri tej uprizoritvi, se pravi, 𝗔𝗺𝗫𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 deluje nekako po principu dobesednega gledališča. Uprizoritev nekako želi čim bolj izčistiti in hkrati v njo vnesti neko metaforo vseh teh več likov, se pravi, oziroma ne likov, ampak ljudi iz realnega življenja. V predstavi reprezentirajo trije igralci, ki v bistvu ves čas, dobro uro pa pol, vihtijo eno tako krožno konstrukcijo in hkrati govorijo te izjave, ki so jih govorili te omenjeni delavci. Drug primer je dramsko besedilo Naše skladišče 𝗊𝗀𝗊𝗀𝗀, ki pa seveda vstopa v nek popolnoma drug kontekst in govori o 4 delavkah, ki se preživljajo z delom v trgovskem skladišču nekega pač velike korporacije. Znotraj tega lahko rečemo, da vstopamo v neko fikcijo, ki pa izhaja seveda iz zelo realne situacije. In glede na to, da sem malo na ozkem s časom, bom tle izpostavila en lik Marije. To je lik študentke oziroma mlade ženske, ki je nedavno doštudirala, stara 28 let, kakor piše tudi v Didaskalijah. In znotraj te ekipe 4 žensk, ki so generacijsko zelo raznolike in tudi z nekimi različnimi značaji in stališči do življenja, ona pravi njim, da v bistvu, ko našparam denar za tisk knjige, izginemo tu. Potem druga reče, v skladišču med odmori piše knjigo, obdana škatlami ribjih paštet in kitajskega fižola. Se pravi, ta lik te Marije se meni zdi zanimiv z tega vidika, ker je v bistvu, se mi zdi, da predstavlja en lik, v katerega lahko vpišemo ne samo znotraj tega skladišča, ampak tudi širše v družbi, tako imenovani razredni sram oziroma sram razrednega prebega. Gre za nek sram, ki v bistvu zasleduje delavski razred, ne glede na to, kje se pojavijo. Se pravi, da ljudje iz delavskega razreda ali kakršnekoli revščine v momentu, ko morda preidejo v nek višji razred, se v bistvu s tem njihova bitka ne konča, ampak se v bistvu šele začne, ker morajo naenkrat v bistvu se ugotovijo, da ne pripadajo ne enemu, ne drugemu. In tle bi se tudi navezala na eno odlično knjigo, ki je sicer mislim, da zdaj v nastajanju, francoskega pisatelja Didiera Ribona, Vrnitev v Rejm, v kateri avtor opisuje svojo pač mukotrpno pot iz svojega okolja odraščanja, ki je bilo izredno revno in prikrajšano, hkrati pa se seveda on ukvarja tudi z svojo gejevsko identiteto in pravzaprav govori o tem, večkrat omeni, da je v bistvu spopadati se z neko dediščino revščine mnogo težje, kot se spopadati z neko spolno identiteto, ki ni normativna. In mogoče, da sam še končam, da mogoče povzamem to neko tezo, zakaj se mi zdi pomembno o tej problematiki govoriti, je to, da kljub temu, da se gledališče absolutno, sploh zadnje čase, zelo angažirano ukvarja z marginalnimi skupinami, z zatiranimi, s preslišanimi in nevidnimi in tako naprej, lahko ugotovimo, da je v bistvu z tega vidika kljub temu zelo težko se spopasti z vidika revščine. Se pravi, na naših odrih vidimo predstavnike in predstavnice populacije, ne vem, LGBT, begunce, hendikepirane, z duševnimi motnjami, nikoli pa ne vidimo revnega človeka. Ne? In tle je vprašanje zdaj, seveda eno je vprašanje, kako pristopiti k temu, hkrati pa se mi zdi, da tle igra zelo pomembno vlogo prav ta razredni sram, ki se mi zdi ena pač najbolj problematična in akutna točka, kako to sploh v bistvu preseči. Ja.
Colleague Maja Murnik. She holds a PhD in philosophy and theory of visual culture. She works as a freelance critic, essayist, and researcher of the theater, and is going to present the paper with the title "The Smart Text: The Contemporary Slovenian Drama and the Documents." So she's going to invite it into the fields of the documents and contemporary drama texts. Please.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. In the paper stems from the starting point that in last decades we are witnessing a series of changes in drama and theater. And these changes are referring to the crisis of representation and of drama form, as it is well known, as well as to the rise of heterogeneous, performative, and significance-open structures. We are facing hybrid, ready-made, non-dramatic texts, which can be also named as texts in movements, or in the Deleuzean Guattarian sense, also a text as a rhizome. And among all these changes, a peculiar interest in document and documents can be noticed. What is at stake here is neither the issue of documenting a theater performance, nor the strategies of its preservation against decay, but the use of documents in drama texts or stage plays, either as the starting point or a source material for the authors, or are they directly included into a performance. We are talking about pre-existing documenting materials such as articles in newspapers, news from TV, interviews, correspondence, official reports, trial transcriptions, and so on, that are used in theater in its more or less original textual forms. Here the focus lies on the verbal documents the textual, not in the sense of cultural studies where text is everywhere, also the pictorial ones and so on, but with its verbal structure. These are the documents that are directly incorporated into the textscape of performance and can function as a substitution for the classical drama play, either of a whole play or as a part of it. They serve as an engine in the performance which seeks to present and perform real stories and real problems and topics. The use of such documents tends to the surpassing or transcending of an artwork, of an artifact, of a text as an autonomous and self-contained entity. It implies the search for a closer relationship with non-artistic or extrinsic words. Here, not only the issues of protean relationships between fiction and reality and the issues of intertextuality and postmodernism as well are being raised, but also the issues of social responsibility, engagement, and political activism. Therefore, the use of the document can function as the following, and I will name some categories which are provisional, not exclusive, and they are also covering each other. That means that some text or some performance can cover two or only one of these categories. They use them just as the starting point for the article and for this discussion. So as a first category, understood in a broader sense, documents can be used as a part of a postmodern game. Here we come across to the understanding of the text as a texture, as the intertwining of citations as pastiche. One example of such a text can be Willy Ravnjak's Potovanje v Rim, A Travel to Rome. Then, as a second, such documents can be used and included into a performance in the name of the testimony, with the aim of the testimony. For example, Simona Semenic uses documentary text in her autobiographical solo performances, Trilogy of the Victim, Trilogija žrtve, and especially in his Me, the Victim, Jaz, žrtev, in which she describes and performs her experiences with bureaucratized and non-human apparatuses of health and cultural systems, and other inequalities and injustice. By doing so, she also shows how the documents are performative in its very essence. Using the documents as a testimony and also as included into the game can be in such author can be understood Croatian-Bosnian director Oliver Frljić, which after Toporišič deconstructs and ironizes the horizon of expectations. In his performances, the documents are used in a way that there no certainty exists anymore. These documents do not bring one single interpretation of the meaning of his performance, but they are used in a way that build a broken and fragmented word, non-reliable word. 5 minutes, yeah, okay. This is just one from his performance. The use of the documents can also represent the prevailing or the domination of mediatized culture and of society of spectacles. Next one, there also can be used as a part of function, of other function, functions which contemporary art practices appropriate, for instance, socially engaged activist or political functions. Here we can mention documentary theater by 𝗀𝗻𝗵𝗀𝗃 Piscator, a contemporary of Bertolt Brecht, and his mixture of art and politics, and theater as the means to enlighten proletarian spectators. Along with this category, a notion smart text can be used. It is a text which is intertwined with other cultural texts. This is text open to novel functions and to the extensions of itself, to the prothesis of his body. It alludes to something above that is beyond it and cannot be read without the knowledge of these extensions. When talking about socially engaged theater and socially engaged documents, it seems as the documents give the authors the assurance for the truth, as well as the elevated moral position from which they utter a statement. Here are two examples of this. We just not have enough time to analyze them in detail. This will go to the article. However, it turns out that by entering the scene, a document always proves to be something open and thoroughly performative. It proves that the document talks about something other that is used to be. It cannot be performed in itself. The performance must always choose one interpretation, how to sort the so-called facts. This is already the interpretation. A document itself is never a conveyor of truth. Conversely, by entering the stage, its semantic openness and performativity immediately turns out. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pity you could not go to details, but we're going to read basically the elaboration, but I found your insight into the use of documents, the written documents in the theater and drama is something which is highly interesting, and I think it's something which we should refer to a lot. Thank you very much once more, and now I would like to welcome our colleague Hana Strejčkova, who graduated from the Prague Academy of Performing Arts, and currently you are a doctoral student and the teacher at the Department of Non-Verbal Theater, but you're also a playwright. You also write plays, and your dramatic work builds on memories of the 20th century based on oral history of witnesses, you know, so everything combines. The documentation is something which is quite crucial for you. So please, the title of your presentation is Site-Specific Author Drama. We're waiting for your elaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. My paper discusses role of the playwright in the context of site-specific performance nowadays. So let's go. From the 1960s and 70s, the tendency to restructure and redefine art from within intensified. So initiatives such as action art, happening or performance, and many other expressive art forms, including theatrical ones, began to break out of the established frame of reference. In the visual art, artists left the institutional gallery, and alternative theatrical concept shaped the field of performance. So the artists, they search for abandoned spaces. Artists paid attention to openness and the relationship to purest corporeality and shared experience was renewed to collective creation, also in the sense of the importance of participatory forms and interaction with the audience. So the author drama and author theater developed as a search for the originality of theatrical speech, and the textual structure was loosened. As we know, Casimir Brown united these efforts to capture this Reformation territory in the publication, The Second Theatre Reform. And with this tendency, a wave of authorial approach grew, which professor and theatrologist Jan Císař called the creation of an autonomous reality of the stage. So authors' theatre was usually referred to as a type of theatre that worked with authorial texts, and there was not much distinction between the literary, dramatic authorship or performance, authorial performance. So according to Jan Císař, this term understood the personality or personal attitude of the actor, the performer. So everything they show is only their own, most personal manifestation, he says. Today, however, the term authors' theatre can also refer to the fact that this theatre is an expression of a distinctive, unique opinion and attitude of its creators to more general issues of social events or a certain sense of life. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a generalization statement. It shouldn't be also political theatre, could be also devised theatre, or everything above mentioned, pure personal acting, but above all, the equal rights of all staging components, driven by the author, playwright, or team of artists of various professions who seek creative new starting points for grasping the topic. And it doesn't have to, if it happens, use or have the literature context, or it can treat the literature or drama completely arbitrarily, says also the theatrologist Jan Císař. However, authors' theatre in the context we examine can return to the text, even the dramatic text, and its interpretation and role-playing. At the same time, it places great emphasis on movement scores as a metaphorical parallel to the source text. It continues to transform a word or textual source into a non-verbal, non-linguistic means of expression, including scenography, object, and sound design. Theatrologist 𝗀𝗶𝗺𝗁𝗀𝗃 stated that the stage creation itself brings more self-reliant, artistically unique values independent of the text level, which is related to the emphasis on developing non-verbal means of expression and procedures with the search for new aesthetic possibilities of theatre and means in it, new communications. This brings the text or literary source to the same level with movement exercises, as we already experience with Jerzy Grotowski theatre or in Jacques Lecoq's pedagogy. So, who is the author in the contemporary authors' theatre? Firstly, there is the author of the original in the sense of text, libretto, or ideas territory. It could be a topic, memories, object, etc. But there is also the author as a creator of theatrality in its broadness. Jan Císař stated that he sees the essence of authors' theatre in an uncovered, exposed, and demonstrated special approach to the world, art, and people, and he characterizes the author's principle as a demonstration of his own relationship to a certain life situation. So in the author's theatre, the hierarchy of creative approaches and expressive elements is reorganized, but this doesn't necessarily end the functional division of tasks, such as author of the theatre, author of performance, and the others, and thus does not disrupt the relationship to dramatic text. So author's theatre is characterized by openness, with which, however, primarily and inevitably comes the definition of one's own conception of theatrality, distinctive poetics, unique artificial reality. The theatre space was generally created for the purpose of communicating the performance. Its conventional division into stages and auditoriums has historically, but especially in recent decades, disrupted by new scenography solutions, even site-specific performances. We experience site-specific performance in recent decades as a methodology that wants to consciously be in contact with a specific environment with all its qualities, uniqueness, but also with its history and conflicts. The site-specific approach is based on exploring the possibilities of specific environment through artistic creation. In these cases, there is often a purposeful special solution in which there is no automatic area for play and a separate seating for spectators. Often the boundaries, also the traditionally perceived theatrical ramp, are blurred watching the action from a standing position, even walking, to intimate proximity. All is related to the poetics of the work. It is an integral part of the concept, and it creates an artistic experience. The creators consciously work with the properties of space, such as distance, direction of the viewer's gaze, thermal and olfactory comfort, visibility, because both the theme, the action, and everything that surrounds the spectator and touches him, metaphorically and directly, becomes one from the primary levels of the author's approach to the communication of the topic and shapes the viewer's perception. Paradoxically, even with countless reruns or longitudinal concepts, site-specific performance is a unique event in many details and respects in every moment. The spectator who observes what is happening around him actively or only with a distance creates other relationships and connotations with his presence and sometimes even commitment. Postmodern theater says, the theatrologist Julius Gajdoš stated that in this type of theater, the spectator becomes the protagonist. Its place is inside of the story, inside of the performance. A qualitative research method of oral history appeared in our environment already in 1960s. However, we can talk about the broad spectrum use of the method only from the post-revolutionary 1990s, and especially now, after the turn of the new millennium. When we were preparing the production from Madlenka to Madla, it turned out the more eloquent than historical facts about the suffering of abandoned children during World War II. We used objects, photographs, recurring scenography motifs, and breath, and repetitive elements such as radio or dim light. We used the main heroine of the story and as an object, baby, which the mother had to put away in a building after the family was called for transport. The performance was performed mostly in cellars, the chapels and non-functional village inns. The spectators watched the life path of the child and their rescuers, and gradually they could join the performance. They shared bread. They have been warmed by the fire. For spectator participation, we offered involvement in the level of belonging. Our goal wasn't to confront the hostile parties in the war, but to expand the circle of helpful, or at least actively present people who thought for themselves beyond their own willingness, the courage to risk saving someone else's life. Thus, the dramatic situation in its classical form took place not only on stage, but among the audience too. A year later, we focused on the history of the place on the Czech-German-Polish border. The production hotel on the corner was based on a collection of stories and things, including clothes, photographs, and building materials from 1932-1989. To this day, the border zone is coming to terms with the stigmas of history, such as the bilateral displacement of Sudetenland, post-war decay, social decline, crime, ethnic discord. The performance was located in an unreconstructed theater building from the 1950s on the border, and the main guys were the hotel receptionist and the maid and the journalist, and the audience, as well the spectators, were the hotel guests. At the same time, we were in the process of preparing a production which used artistic means to approach the individual phases of Alzheimer's dementia. The playwright's work consisted not only in collecting memories, but above all in participatory observation, following and communicating with clients. As part of the research, I got a part-time work for 2 years in a home with a residential service and developed a concept in direct contact with clients. The production Free Chairs has been staged more than 50 times in many places in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Most often, these were specific areas of residential facilities in which authenticity, closeness, and intelligibility were guaranteed. And at the same time, the difference between actors, caregivers, and clients was blurred. So the theatrical form here served to momentarily break down barriers and empathize. In 2018, a collection of memories was published. I published the book 222 and Two Stories of the 20th Century, and that became the basis of the following dramatic work. The performative potential of the true events of 1950 and 1951 was developed by classical staging procedures with the director's authority in collaboration with the playwright. So we staged the midnight in the borderland, and that became a turning point, as it was a symbiosis of the memory of place, oral history, and taboo subject. So memory of the place of monastery, oral history based on testimonies of witnesses, and taboo subject was that evacuation of monastery in 1950 and displacement from Sudetenland. As you can also read, there were the characters driven really from the history, but also some other roles crystallized by a synthesis of details from chronicles, memories, and feelings from the place itself. The original dramatic text was created in which each of the characters solved his dramatic situation against the background of the cold environment. Relentless nighttime until the space is vacated in 70 minutes, and at the same time the dichotomy of morality and ego of the individual characters is revealed. The spectators, like the author who wrote the drama, was placed in a church bench, and everybody became witnesses of the events. The plot took place not only in front but all around them, but below and above them, even in parallels. The degree of participation, active observation, is then individual, but of course unclaimed. Dramatic situation, was constantly mixed with dramatic events. So this paper, Theory and Retrospective, very short, Retrospective of Selected Word, confirmed that the combination of a strong theme, an unusual place, tied to the theme of drama and the participatory role of the audience, can be an effective strategy in strengthening the author's role in drama after the new millennium, after the year 2000. Site-specific author's drama in contemporary theatre, thanks to the aspects described above, has a demonstrable potential to appeal to such groups of audience for whom a visit classical theatre or a production based on a classical dramatical text is unthinkable. The attractiveness of this unpredictable symbiosis from which a specific theatricality emerge, a new language and the new world, can make taboo areas accessible by artistic means as well as theatrical art itself. The territory of contemporary drama, in the context of site-specific performance, is as open and limited as its creators and viewers. Thank you.
It was a very interesting insight also into the creative work of the contemporary playwrights and also contemporary theater. We're heading now for the time of discussions. Are there any questions for our colleagues, Krištof, Zala, Maja, and Hana? Yes, please.
Perhaps just a question.
Yeah.
All the titles somehow avoid the use of the post-dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
So would our referees say us something, whether they would opt for staying with the term drama? Is this polarization pertinent to them or not?
Thank you, Lana. It's a very interesting question. Please. Maybe we just, Jacek, we begin and then we go.
Then let me break the ice, with this question, which is rather provocative, I have to admit.
And you translated post-dramatic theater, the Lehmann's book also.
I mean, of course, it's difficult after 30 years of talking about post-dramatic, certainly start denying it, right? This is no way to go around it. Namely, my question before that I posed went exactly in the same direction. I mean, what are we confronted with right now in contemporary times, right? And I can talk for me, for one, that from my perspective, in a way, there is the return of, well, let's say a text, simply. A text, a story, as we saw with in Hana's presentation, a story, right? Story being pulled out of the either individual or collective history. And in this way, of course, one could say that this is a movement, at least in my perspective, away from the hardcore, hardline post-dramatic, the Lehmanesque post-dramatic, but in a way it's not, because it's simply bringing in more things, right, into the contemporary situation, which simply develops, opens up the theater as we know it, the drama, the text as we actually know it, in a different direction. So, yeah, what I for one was asking myself was not exactly where where the post-dramatic has remained, if I may say so, but exactly what do we do now with this question of authenticity that we have been dealing, and digging around since early morning, and reality, as you said, because no matter what, theater remains I apologize for this expression, a sacred place, a convention. And no matter how hard we try to break this convention and bring in, as vivid documents as possible, up to naked human body, it still becomes a sign. It still loses precisely its original meaning, right? And I don't think we can go around that. I don't think we can escape that. But if it's called post-dramatic or post or whichever, right, this remains to be seen. But I do think that, and especially with the return, in a way, of a revival of fiction, in a way, right, fictional stories that return to theater, we are moving somewhere different. That would be my answer.
Thank you for the question. I will be short. In my case, I think that when it comes to the theme of poverty and precarious population and so on, I think that at least for now, in the first plan, there is a narrative, I must say, because I think that it's very important for each of the production, to give a message very clearly in that way, because I think that, and this I can read of one layer of being political, yeah, not in the structure, but in a theme, yeah, and I think that this will be the next step, maybe, when they will address this theme via some post-dramatic or more experimental forms, yeah, but yeah, I think that now the base has to be completed somehow. I have this feeling now, this is my interpretation, and afterwards there will be, questioning of theater, of forms, and so on, yeah.
I will just continue in the same sense, as I studied classical drama and then switched to the research of postmodern forms and stuff. My base and the base I research is a classical drama in a postmodern theater, but the first step is a witnessing testimony, going for dramatic situation and their classical really mean. And then it's fulfilled and enriched by postmodern forms as a commenting, experimenting, sound design, also scenography, even site-specific stuff, but also the participation of audience. If something new is coming. And also there is a doubled situation, it means for story, for narrative, and the dramatic situation for the spectators, who really take the role of active spectators, active viewers or observers, which is, I think, that postmodern form already, because it involves the auditorium together. So I feel the classical drama after 2000 is very important to give a message, to be understood as a theatrical maker, creator, but also to be understood in a broader social context.
I think all three presenters, I agree with them and answered this question. I don't have nothing to add to this team. But I have another a question for Zala. Zala, zelo mi je bila všeč tvoja prezentacija. V bistvu imam vprašanje, oziroma bolj tak pomislek, glede pač tega pojma delavski razred. In se sprašujem, a je to še ta delavski razred, v katerem je Marx pisal? In pač pri vseh teh težavah, ki jih imamo v kognitariatu, ali pa ne vem, kako bi vse skupaj imenovali, a obstajajo kakšne razlike, mislim, to je bolj kot neko tako vprašanje mogoče za večji tekst ali za neko večjo debato, za ne vem, celo knjigo.
Mislim, sem imela tudi to eno ali ne, ampak nisem imela časa priti do tega. Jaz mislim, da je ena ta bistvena razlika, ki se danes kaže med prekariatom in delavskim razredom, je ta, da recimo imamo primere, to kar pravim, recimo mlajša generacija, ki se ukvarja s temi temami, ne, je vedno vprašanje, ali so recimo njihovi starši vseeno pa premožni in so oni tisti, ki so pa danes v negotovih časih, sploh če se recimo z gledališčem ukvarjajo. Ne. Se pravi to, da imamo relacijo, da je neka dediščina, ampak da je pač ta druga generacija se znajde v negotovih časih. Drug primer je pač res ta radikalni delavski razred, v katerem piše tudi 𝗔𝗫𝗫𝗫, je pa ta, kjer v bistvu on super reče, on ima en citat, ki reče, revne družine oziroma pravi delavski razred ničesar ne prenese naprej, ne stanovanj, ne vem kaj ne rečem, umetnosti, ne slik, ne ničesar. Se pravi, da se vsakič znova spostavlja na novo. In zato se mi zdi tle neka razlika, da prekariat znotraj teatra še ima neko moč, da spregovori, medtem ko ta delavski razred, o katerem govorim, ki se nima na nič opret, pa v bistvu ne more, ne, na nek način. Tako da tle se mi še vedno zdi, da ja, so različni layeri, absolutno, ne, med tem, kako razumeti delavski razred oziroma nek razred brez, ki enostavno nima podpore, no, v zadnji. In s tem je tudi seveda povezano neko tveganje ali pa neko eksperimentiranje, ne, ki se ga lažje privoščiš, če veš, da boš, kljub temu, da ne vem, mogoče ostaneš brez finančnega zaledja, imaš še vedno, ne vem, neko družinsko podporo, ne, v tem smislu, ne. Kako? Ja, tako nekako, ja. Ja.
You're speaking about delavski razred, about precariat and so on, but what are the examples that you are thinking of? To mention, can you please mention the example of a drama or a performance that considers these issues that you are presenting?
Yeah, I mean, two of them I chosen for today's. They are very different, but they are somehow addressing the same problems. Yeah, that is the one thing that I kind of want to explore more. I also mentioned 𝗀𝗀𝗻𝗁𝗀𝗀, who is also, I mean, the thing that interesting me the most is this shame of being, becoming from working class. So that's why I refer to this French writer, 𝗔𝗫𝗫𝗫, because I think, and that is one person from this drama Naše skladišče, you know, the young girl who writes the book. And you know that if you are poor and you're writing a book, first of all, you're not connected to the important people, you know. It's very hard to, you know, mingle around in some events. It's I think the way to go to come to this place, it's very it's very hard, yeah. And and also, yeah, I didn't have time also for this. For example, 𝗙𝗫𝗫𝗫𝗫, he's the one who was making the performance, the one of that I mentioned. he's dealing with this theme while he was studying at the academy. Not like the whole pieces, but he always have some sets or some inserts that describe, some kind of working class people who are depending on their work, who they don't have any heritage and so on. I don't know, did I answer you? Yeah.
Maybe I would have a question also for you, for Maja and Zala, because Zala, you were speaking about 𝗙𝗂𝗪𝗀𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀😊😂 the title was which basically goes back to Cankar, to the Slovene Moderna, which dealt with this theme. But the thing which is interesting is that you talked about the specific documentary procedures he makes. This is this could be called a post-dramatic or no longer dramatic play, basically, which was part of the device theater concept and process, and it works very well within the theater. It also suits to the theme. It basically elaborates the theme, which is very rarely elaborated in the Slovene theater. So maybe how do you both comment the usage of the documents in this process? Yeah. You and then Maja, through her exploration of the documents, the textual documents used in the contemporary theater. And then our colleague has also a question, yeah.
Okay, I cannot explain this regarding this 𝗀𝗶𝗫𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀
Okay, so we will
Yeah, okay,
let
it was like
Zara
this. Okay,
describe
sorry,
it.
yeah. Well, this is another issue, problem, because I think it was performed, I don't know what to say, less than 10 times, absolutely, yeah. I don't know why, it's a co-production of 𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗏 Dom, and I don't know. Of course, it was because of the 𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗏 years, and also, yeah. I think that in 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗏, the director did like very good example of facts and metaphorical level, in a way that he created like, somehow, like you say, laboring, the whole system. They are like, it's a physical theater. Like in one way, 3 actors, they are pushing this, it's an artificial thing, I don't know how to call it, but they are pushing all around in a circle. It's getting very physical, of course, after 1 hour, and at the same time they are repeating this verbatim texts that they got from the interviews. And I think that if I compare it to the Republika Slovenia, yeah, it's here what I admire the most, it's a metaphorical level that came out, which is, I think, the next level of every documentary project. Yeah, one is to be very direct, to be very pure in the message, but to somehow create another level is something that I think it's very, very, yeah. And that's why I answer it. We can say it's post-dramatic, but it's still narrative. That is not something that I wanted. It's not something that I have to collect and to put some more imagination or something. It's very clear in this, yeah.
The paradox of the book of Hans T. Sleman is that he does not define the post-dramatic text in the book. Jacek knows is where basically, because he speaks about the post-dramatic, but not so much about the post-dramatic text. I agree with you. We have 2 more questions. The first one will be by Alexandra, or a comment, Jovicevic, and then we have a question from our colleague 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗏, who came by from the universe, from Canada. I'm joking, but it's a nice question. So maybe we start with Alexandra, and then I'll read the question of our colleague 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗏 from Canada.
Okay, this is more like a comment to all this, more than a question, right? Because it struck me something from all these 4 papers, and too bad I didn't hear them before writing my paper, because they're very interesting, because they opened up certain ways of thinking. And what you said about post-dramatic theater, there is a new, we can define maybe a new stream or some kind of direction or whatever. It's the approach, a new approach to the classics. So most of these texts, 80% except maybe one or two, even 𝗷𝗵𝗺𝗀𝗃𝗴 has references to the classics, are related to the classics, and especially the plays Krištof brought to the fore are repeating again, recycling in a certain way, or having this approach toward classics. And this is for me very interesting, because how come we don't have new ways? Maybe we are lacking a language to describe what is going on, the poverty, the immigration crisis and so forth. And it's, I mean, it's nothing, it's not really like a new, it's not a question to all of them, but it's some kind of comment. And even documents have this kind of role of classics, because they are put in a new, let's say, a network of meaning, and they become a new text or some kind of new production. So I don't know if anybody, any of four of you can have, you said you studied classics and you wrote your paper on this classical text, so maybe somebody can give me an answer or whatever.
Please.
Well, thank you for your comment. I can, of course, speak only for myself. I for one, actually would say that having, as you mentioned, translated Lehmann into Slovenian, I would say that I understood him as describing all the new movements in theater going away from or escaping this pressure of text, right, of logos in theater. Whereas what we are dealing now with is these texts somehow through the back door or whatever, returning to the stage and giving this newly minted post-dramatic theater new ways of expression, new content actually. And I would probably not say recycle, but probably inject with new life. If, of course, we stick to the word itself. So, yeah, I do agree that, I mean, as I see it, right, is that there is, and the conference I understand is also devoted to this topic, is having a return, sort of having a revivification of some sort, and that text as a theatrical entity is being given some weight again. But that might be just my perception.
No, it's a very good perception. Maybe I could continue with the question of 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, which basically relates to what you opened up now, what Alexandra opened up, and it relates to, of course, to the classics, to the dealing with classics. I found when you were talking, I was thinking about Dušan Jovanović, his Antigone, and of course Dušan Jovanović, his riddle of courage, which is based on Brecht and which deals with the topic you spoke about. It deals with the topic of proletariat, basically refugees and proletariat, which is so we can see we have a stream which deals with this theme, which is not a very strong one, but it exists. But now I will go to the question of Jure for Jacek. The question reads as follows: doesn't the fact that Hertmann's Antigone is an exemplary and not a representative figure make her a quintessentially modern rather than a postmodern, and therefore a post-dramatic character? So you see that the question Lada asked is proceeding now, and it's again Jacek and then the others who have to answer to it. I'm sorry. I'm joking, but it's a very good question, I found, yeah.
Yeah, hello. I know Jure is always pulling my leg, so hi Jure. Hi to Canada, Halifax. Thanks for this tricky question, but I would start answering by saying that perhaps I was not clear enough in presenting my paper that yes, classical Antigone is sort of put on pedestal, and she's being perceived as, you know, almost a saint, and especially during the 2000, plus years, that we have been dealing with this text, she almost reached an unbelievable dimensions. Whereas precisely what Hetmans does is that he brings his Antigone with exactly the same qualitative dimensions or qualitative relationships down to earth, actually among us. And well, I would not read, as you suggested, the text as, you know, almost a saintly one. Antigone or this Nuria being somebody who we may only look up to. On the contrary, this is exactly, and this Molenbeek as a place is a proof of that we actually, well, descended back down to on earth, right? I could, you know, elaborate more on that, but let this be enough for now. If you have another question, please be free. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jacek. Maybe someone Lada would like to comment and continue.
I just want to comment upon Alexandra's provocation.
Mm-hmm.
Return to classics is perhaps also a need to return to myth, to return what connects us, rather than to atomized, you know, events that somehow, you know, exploded in 70s, 90s, you know, it's these atomized landscape, which is very hard to follow and sometimes hard to connect with, now is having this reaction, a return to classics as a return to myths. Of course, we insert new topics, new nuances, new comments, new interpretations, deviations, whatever. But return to classic is also a return, I think, to something, some kind of axis on which we can then see the differences in the new context. That's my sense. Yes, not necessarily strong narratives in this repressive sense, because there is always room. I mean, there is always room for minorities, for sexual differences, etc., and other differences, and political issues, poverty, class issues, definitely. But there is a need for an initial identification, which then enables, I think, the understanding of difference and of what is new in drama.
Alexandra would like to comment, and then we have another question by Jure for Strejčkova.
There is something about Antigone which I wanted to tell. It's very important myth because it serves as some kind of like a reminder or correction of a male interpretation of history. So Antigone is above all this, and she's always the protector of those of higher moral order, or let's say of the gods, and not the human condition. And human condition is very limited, and with all these problems and everything. And Antigone, she serves as a counterpoint, something like that. That was the first comment. And the second comment, with 𝗍𝗍𝗺𝗍𝗍, his text is very important because Thomas Ostermeyer did a new production, something which is very interesting because it goes from one country to another, where he's selecting an actress who is reading from the book of 𝗍𝗍𝗺𝗍𝗺, and they are projecting a documentary, a video of 𝗍𝗍𝗺𝗍𝗺 coming back home and encountering with his father, who is a worker, and closed the factories and everything. So I think as a genre, it's very interesting to have this kind of confrontation, that you have the actress from the spot. I saw it in Italy, but I know that he was doing in different countries the same thing. And she was narrating from the book, and you could see the real situation. The video served as a document of what is the real situation, and then 𝗍𝗍𝗺𝗍𝗺 comments, and I found it a very interesting production, as some kind of clash of two ways of thinking, or maybe producing video as it has its own narration, and then the text has its own narration, and then the presence of the body of the actress on the stage. this is a small comment on regarding the text we heard before. Okay, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I won't
We
May
still
I
have
just-
5 minutes, and then we will, I think, I mean, yeah, of course, yeah. We're going, yeah.
May I just
Maybe
finish actually my previous comment, and then I'll
Jacek, and then
stop.
the question of Jure, and then Barbara.
Yeah. Because you're referring to the myth. I mean, this is something that I personally would be very wary of. Namely, myth, archetypes, stereotypes, right? That this is exactly what lifts these texts, above our, the regular human level. So is this exactly what connects us, right? Or is it precisely the case of, or example of one person, one individual person, not complete, not above everybody else, that shows this internal humanity? But on the other hand, I really am between the hammer and an anvil, right, in a tight spot, because I do have to concede that the Hertmann's text is called Antigone in Molenbeek, right? Probably our perspective would be completely different if it were Nuria in Molenbeek, right? So by this imposing the title of the tragedy that has such a fraught meaning and fraught content, of course, already initializes all the cognitive procedures that stand behind. So you are right in a way, right? Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Just a story. The literal translation of the word is the story.
Right.
So it's not something about.
Right.
And it's definitely not a stereotype.
A stereotype.
Definitely not.
Okay, so we disagree that we agree, or we agree that we disagree. I'm just using this mixture of words. I will proceed to the very interesting question of Jure, which is quite complex, of course, as all his questions. And he has a question for our colleague Strejčkova. Could you elaborate on the difference between author and auteur? So it's a short question, but quite complex.
Yeah, okay, I wanted also to add to myths and archetypes, just one thing, because I had the same ideas journey inside, that it's necessary, and what we can see nowadays, that we use like embodied collective experience, which can connect past and nowadays, because the myths, as it was said, is a narrative, and we can stick to some archetypes, some heroes, and we join the journey. And if we can embody the experience by our body, by our ideas, experiences, it can come as a connection. So we find new language, new code for communication in a theatrical way. So, and for the authors and auteur, so it depends what kind of view we are watching it. I divided author and authors because I'm using a lot, and I used a lot, description of playwright as an author of a text, but also there is that auteur, it means like collective creation from the beginning till end. So the text is a starting point, but then, nevertheless, it is an author's text. It's a getting to new creation by this text.
Okay.
Is it?
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, it's a very nice answer. But hopefully, it's also for you.
If it's something I can add, I don't want to.
Going to
Yeah.
write something and going to discuss it later on, because I could speak just for myself, as Jacek told it before. So a question of Barbara, and then we could finish. We should finish. Let us say. Yes, please, Barbara. Yeah.
But I think quite a complex question for Maja. You mentioned that the document is never a conveyor of truth. However, a document is always, well, I think so, that is always a trace of authenticity. So how do you think of these two terms, about the truthfulness or untruthfulness of the, about the performativity of the document on the one hand, and the performativity of authenticity on the other?
Very complex one. Complex. Well, I think document is always shows only a part of truth. I think this is the basement. And when it, because of the, how is this called, signifiers, 𝗙𝗏 označava so signifiers 𝗙𝗏. And when the document enters into the scene on the stage, it is transferred from some context to other context. And this destroys this authenticity and the truth of the document, because it's always some interpretation if you use it in the front of the stage, if you use it on the back of the stage, is some actor or performer utters the document, if it is in this way or this way performed. There is always something that is added to the truth of the document. And I think this means that some interpretation enters the document. And so this is not anymore as it was. That's something.
Thank you. With this, I think we're going to finish this wonderful session. 𝗀𝗶𝗺𝗽𝗂, please, give us instructions for the rest of the day. Yeah.